Presidential parody is nothing new in today's political landscape, and it was certainly fertile grounds for this week's episode, 1993's Dave, starring Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver. Kevin plays Dave, an ordinary man who runs a temp agency and on the side impersonates President Bill Mitchell. Dave's life is turned upside down when Bill passes away during a tryst with his mistress, and for reasons that are not entirely clear, takes his place instead of the person whose job it actually is, the vice president, played brilliantly by Ben Kingsley. Now, would you believe that our obsession with lampooning the president actually began with the Coolidge administration in the 1920s. The first brave attempt to parody a sitting president was made on the radio by Will Rogers, the most dominant comedian of his time. Think Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, and Dave Letterman all rolled into one. In a 1928 broadcast, after a somewhat predictable monologue, Rogers included a few lines that emulated Coolidge's tight, wiry voice riffing on the topic of American prosperity. But the idea was so novel and shocking that not everyone realized it was fake. Within days, Rogers was forced to explain and apologize, vowing to never lampoon a president again. Despite that promise, he made another run at it 6 years later in 1934, parodying Franklin Delano Roosevelt on a radio program having an absurd conversation with a Soviet diplomat. Roosevelt, for his part, liked it a lot. And after Rogers' various attempts, the idea of presidential impersonation effectively lay dormant for a couple of decades. There was even an unofficial clampdown during World War II because of fears that a fake message from a president could stoke fears or sow confusion at a time when propaganda was seen as a key wartime resource. It wasn't until John F. Kennedy ushered in the Age of Camelot that the idea suddenly returned, largely because of a young, then unknown stand-up comedian. In 1962, comedian Von Meter worked a bit into his act where he pretended to be Kennedy holding a press conference. It netted huge laughs. So when Meter got booked on a CBS show called Talent Scouts, he brought his A game and his Kennedy impersonation. Gasps of amazement at Meter's precision and perhaps his audacity are immediately followed by swelling waves of laughter and applause. Producers quickly got him to put together an entire album called The First Family that gently poked fun at the Kennedys, and it took the country by storm. Within 2 weeks, it sold more than 1 million copies. And it went on to become the fastest selling pre-Beatles album in US history. It won Album of the Year at the Grammys, eventually selling 7.5 million copies, and was heard by everyone from Martin Luther King Jr. to Kennedy himself. But it was at this moment when presidential impersonation seemed poised to hit its peak, the whole idea came crashing down, because on November 22nd, 1963, Kennedy was assassinated. Suddenly, no one was in the mood for presidential parody, and the idea of mocking a sitting president seemed gauche. Meter, whose career never recovered, went from the country's hottest star to total pariah. He passed away in 2004, but lamented that the day Kennedy died, his career died too. But all it took was one Richard Milhous Nixon and a little hotel burglary you might have heard of to remind us of our insatiable need to laugh at our leaders. With Watergate, the floodgates opened to presidential parody. From there, in 1975, we get Chevy Chase's Gerald Ford's impersonation that consisted of him stumbling into things, falling into Christmas trees, falling off ladders. You get the idea. And then in the following decades, Saturday Night Live turned presidential impersonation into high comedic art, and an entire cottage industry sprang up. You began seeing George W's at car dealerships, Bill Clinton's flirting with bachelorettes in Las Vegas, faux Obamas giving speeches at corporate retreats, and our fictional Dave selling cars. So go ahead and give the subscribe button an on-point impersonation so you never miss a thing. New episodes of the Real Relationships podcast premiere every Thursday on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. We are also on Facebook and TikTok, so follow us on all of our channels so you never miss a thing. As always, stay safe, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we will see you soon.